This lubricating piston and the ring cylinder.
Okay.
Till we meet again.
Hello, fourth graders. I am here at Calico Ghost Town. Now, it's not a ghost town where there's ghosts. It's more like a ghost town like the gold rush and how a lot of people rushed to California for gold, but there was not that much. So this sign says that the man who created Knott's Berry Farm, Walter Knott, was actually a part of Calico Ghost Town. He actually helped create it and made it to honor the gold rush and what brought everyone here to California. So this is the ghost town. There's lots of old historic buildings that you can go into and learn a lot about the gold rush. This is an example of what an actual gold rush town would look like. They'd have a bank, they'd have places to stay, bakeries, saloons, they'd have housing and laundry, more saloons, places to get your hair cut, different places like that, as well as, of course, the gold mine. Also, there would be different places to go to, copper mines, jail, of course, because there was not too many rules back then. A feed store for the animals, because they would be riding horses and using donkeys, and different places like that. So that's kind of what a gold rush town would look like back in the 1800s. Hello, fourth graders. You know the California Republic flag if you've learned about the Bear Flag Revolt. It took place in 1846, and that's when Mexico gave up California in Sonoma. And what's funny about it is that the Mexico governor who is here, he actually just kind of gave up. He was kind of scared that they were surrounding his house, and he decided to go with them and let go of California during that time. Pretty crazy. Here's what it would have looked like going to the dentist back in the 1800s. Not too comfy looking, and they wouldn't have too much medication to help you if you had to get a lot of dentist work done, and you would be in quite a bit of pain when it came to getting a tooth pulled or cavity filled, if they could even do that. It says the dentist office scene will represent the services provided by the people of Old Calico, and there's the different doctors' names. And it said there that they took care of the sick, helped minors who had accidents, and delivered babies too. Imagine your dentist delivering your mom's baby, or you know, you had an accident and they had to take care of you. Interesting. Also over here is a picture, or an example, not a picture, of what it would be like kind of at home and some of the things you'd use to cook and bake. It said there that most of the Calico people, the miners and merchants and their families, were hardworking. They were proud of the law and order, usually absent from boom towns like the towns during the gold rush. So here's some ordinary items that they would use here. There's some different brands of corn flakes. That would be the cereal with that baby on there. And they'd keep their flour in some of those containers. There's a whisk, rolling pin, cookie jar, lots of different interesting things. Here would be what your stove and oven would look like. And of course they didn't have real electricity yet, so they would be using coal inside to heat it up. Here's some other things regarding the time period of the 1800s. People would have a lot of saddles because they'd ride horses or donkeys, and they'd keep their stuff in chests like that one over there. There's a wagon wheel. Here's another dentist chair. Here's a school seat up close. As you can see, the chair is in front of the desk because they would have them in rows, so your chair would be the desk of the person behind you, which is interesting. Here's a spinning wheel that they would use to spin different yarns and fabrics to make fabric and to make clothing. Here's an old piano back there in the corner, and an oven or a stove. Well, it's more of an oven to keep your house warm because there's no heaters yet, no electricity, no gas yet. A lot of people would hang up their clothes on clotheslines to dry because there's no dryers. This would be what the washer would look like if you had enough money to wash it, or if you go to the washer to go get it washed. A lot of the times, Chinese people would actually be running the laundry systems back then because they'd come here for the gold rush and realize there's not enough gold, so they'd open their own businesses and make money that way. Let's take a look over here. Here's a bathtub. Looks very small, very hard to take a bath in. But like I've told a lot of my students in the past, people didn't shower or bathe as much back then, which led them to get sick very often. And here is a washboard that people would use to help wash their clothes. They'd push it against it and rub it against the washboard while it's wet and has soap on it to kind of get it clean. Kind of like how our washers nowadays move around and spin around. That's what they would do to wash their clothes. This is what schools would look like back in the pioneer days. Not too fancy compared to our new schools. Pretty interesting. Let's take a look. So it's saying here the schoolhouse was built in 1885, and this is a replica built in the early 1950s, and that is Calico's first school operated out of a boarding house until the new school was built. And this is what it looked like. Here's what the inside looks like. You notice there's student desks that are attached to the back of the seats. So the person in front of you would technically be sitting at your desk too. There's the blackboard. There's no whiteboards yet. They'd usually have pictures of the presidents. And instead of actual lights, they had lanterns, oil lanterns. Also, sometimes they would have coal burning fireplaces inside of your classroom to keep you warm, and the teacher would have to get coal every day so that you don't freeze. Pretty interesting, a lot different than schools are today. You still got the desks and the seats and all those things, but still a little bit different.
Lessons over here for the schoolhouse. And then once again, my name is Miss Desmond, and I would always greet my students by saying good morning, everybody. And you would say,
Good morning, Ms. Desmond.
Star students, there we go, all done. That's it. All right, because at this time of the day I tend to have older students, then I'll give you a little bit more history about Calico and the schoolhouse. Calico was its own school district from 1882 to 1899. What happened in 1899?
Gold Rush?
The what?
Gold Rush?
Nope.
It's 89.
Oh,
Yes, the mine closed. So it
Or
became
49.
literally a ghost town. There was 4 students that year in the entire town. So, but the enrollment was very different from attendance. When we started, we had 30 students enrolled, but only half of those ever showed up because compulsory education was not in place. School was not mandatory. You didn't have to come to school. And of course, it depended on the family. If they needed you at home, you were at home. And then students only came to school. I mean, it could be little ones, depending on what parents needed, but kids only came to school till the age of 13. Do I have any kids who are 13? I have lots of older kids, but anyone else 13? Okay, because what are little boys doing at 13? They are working. They're going to become apprentices to the blacksmith or the carpenters, or they're going to be out in the mines. They're going to be working. They are adults now. So we tell parents, don't feed them very much so they can fit in the mines. It's okay. Little girls, what are little girls doing at 13? Having their own families, exactly. Having their own families, because remember, we didn't have the beauty of modern medicine at that time. That people didn't live as long. And at 13, you were an adult at that point. If you ever remember your grandparents talking about the 8th grade education, it was true, 8th grade education. So if you ever get a chance to come over to the schoolhouse, there's actually an 8th grade final there. That is very difficult. And it has subjects on it that we don't even know what they are today because we don't teach them. Things like orthography. I'm like, what is orthography? So I had to look it up and find out all about it. But it's interesting what kids had to know, what you were expected to know at that time. And it was a lot more grounded in the community. If it was an agricultural community, you had to know what a bushel was and how much this was and that was. You know, of course, this was a mining town, so you had to know the numbers and the letters dealing with the mines. Because who was this school for? No, actually, interesting enough, miners were young men who came out to seek their fortune. Remember, we just came through a war. And a lot of soldiers, a lot of young men came out west to find their fortune. So this, who makes money off of mining?
The businesses.
There you go. It was the merchants. It was the families of the merchants. And that's whose children came to school. Now, if a young man came out and he did meet a young lady and they did have a family, they of course could come to school. Anybody could come to the school. Okay? At this time, it was really great to be a teacher because you made between $70 and $110 compared to the miners who made $3 a day.
Wow.
So it was a really good deal. However, women, it was not a female profession at the time. It was a male profession. You know the schoolmaster? You guys have all heard about the schoolmaster. Well, we just came through a war, and who goes to war? Men. So we're running out of men now. So it became a female profession. However, as a female, I could not get married. I couldn't have a boyfriend. I couldn't even go to the ice cream parlor or wear fancy, beautiful colored clothes because I might catch someone's eye. I might catch attention. And if I did that, I would lose my job. Because people thought that if I had my own family, that I couldn't take care of the kids. I couldn't take care of my school family. So young girls would go through school and they would become a teacher until they met a young man and took off and got married. And then someone else would come up and be the teacher. That way I didn't have to be a burden on the community. I was still earning my way. Okay? I know it was not quite fair still. And who do you think made that $110 instead of the $70? The men, if they could get a male teacher to come out. Right over here, you actually see a list of the teachers who taught here at the Calico Schoolhouse and how much they made and how many students they had. On that list, however, you will see married women. Now, how do you suppose a married woman would be able to teach school?
No kids.
She's a widow. Yep. And it could be because she lost her husband in the war or the mine or just natural causes, whatever it may be. But it could be that she's a widow, or it could be that they just couldn't get a teacher to come out from the East. We didn't have a lot of teacher colleges at the time. So it was very rare to be able to get a teacher. Now here in Calico, we're so rural as it is, they may or may not have a single female who could be the teacher. So you see a lot of married women on there. Okay? All right, I have a nice big word up here. Can anybody tell me what this word is? It's hard to see.
Abecedarian.
Abecedarian. So if you speak Spanish, there's a clue there, abecedarian. What does it mean?
Alphabet.
There, what about the alphabet? Usually my homeschoolers all get it, and I was like, how do you know that? Abecedarian is the title that someone would have. So if I looked around, I could say there's probably an abecedarian in here. Who do you think would be my abecedarian? Close. You're on the right track. I would come right over here and I'd say, hi, are you learning your ABCs? Probably. She would be my abecedarian. Abecedarian is someone learning their ABCs. However, does it need to be a child?
No.
No. During this time, remember, not a lot of people could read and write, knew their letters and their numbers. Miners were soldiers. They may not know their letters and numbers. So therefore, it could be that the school was available to them in the evening. But when we talk about that, it could be anybody. Now, I told you outside, older students learn their lessons directly from the teacher. Who do you think taught my abecedarians or taught anybody else?
The older kids.
Yep, everybody else. Now we know in a one-room schoolhouse, and research shows today, students learn from each other. The good and the bad, unfortunately. So it's true that in a one-room schoolhouse, kids help teach each other. Okay? The older ones took care of the little ones. So we're going to go through a regular day, and I'm going to let you guys out real quick. We're going to have a shortened day today, but these are the subjects that we would talk about. Can you help me out here?
Reading, writing, arithmetic.
So you guys have heard about the 3 R's, the reading, writing, arithmetic. What is arithmetic? It's a term we don't use a lot today.
Math.
Math, thank you. It's math. And then we'd have some history and geography. And then we have my very favorite, and that's rhetoric. So we're going to get to that piece. When we talk about reading, any teachers? I always have teachers come and talk to me. This was, the one-room schoolhouse was true differentiated instruction, because I could have small groups come up, and I could work with small groups. Well, the rest of the kids are not going crazy, they're helping each other. So when we talk about reading, we didn't have enough books for everybody, and all the different grades, and all the different ages, and all the different levels. No, we did things on the board, and we'd recite things out loud, or we'd do choral reading, or we would call and response. But what is one book that most people had that you would go home and you would learn your letters and your numbers from?
Bible.
The Bible. That was where we recorded our family histories. So all of you, when you were born, your name went in the Bible. When you got married, your name went in the Bible. When you died, your name went in the Bible. And that's what families would do. They would go home and they would learn their letters and numbers from reading the Bible. Writing. What could we write with?
A pen.
Quill pen.
We could write with a pen, but paper was very precious. The only time we would use paper in the classroom was for penmanship. Now, I told you outside I happen to also do colonial and Civil War, and I have original penmanship paper that we would trace, that we would write with. But we wouldn't use it out here because we don't have paper out here. So no pens, no pencils. What else could we write with?
Chalk.
Chalk. Where does chalk come from?
Minerals,
Well,
rocks.
it could come from rocks, because have you ever taken rocks and written with them? Yes. But chalk actually comes from sea creatures. Okay, ground up and wished and all that. But we don't have, we're going to use chalk, but we would use slate. What is slate?
Rock.
For you guys, these are the original iPads. Chalk and slate. So like chalkboards. Okay? So we would write on our chalk and slate. This is what we would use for, our sums or our letters. Now, I usually pass out our chalk and slate and let you guys actually use chalk and slate to write our names. But in the essence of time today, we're not going to do that. When I say write, though, what do I mean by write your name?
Cursive.
Yes, cursive. Now, I've heard a terrible rumor that they're not teaching cursive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for those of you, my older students who grew up with cursive, just be aware that cursive is the sign of an educated mind. So if you're homeschooling your kids, teach them cursive, because the loops that you make in cursive help your brain form different synapses. Okay? So if you can't write your name, then we print. Or we print the first letter of our names. Okay? Arithmetic. I'm sure many of my older students remember reciting our times tables out loud. That's what we would do. We would stand and we would have our small groups, and we could recite our times tables. We could recite our addition. How many of my older students have heard the term towing the line? Yeah. Well, when we look at the floor, we'd have slats. And they could go this way or they could go that way. But children were called up in small groups and asked to put their toes on the line, lining up. And they'd be in front of the board. And so they would toe the line. And we would do our, whatever we're going to do, our sums, our times tables, our addition tables, whatever it may be. As far as geography and history, are we in the east or the west?
West.
West. We came through a war, and I usually do a whole thing about the north and the south and what they're called and all of this. But again, in the essence of time. we're going to move right into my very favorite subject, and that is rhetoric. Now, rhetoric is public speaking, persuasive speaking, but even more than that is articulation and making sure you can be heard and understood, right? So, we are going to do some reading together, some choral reading, and it's going to get really loud in here, I hope. All right, do we use our inside or our outside voices?
Inside.
Inside. Well, this is an opportunity to use our big outside voices. Okay, and I usually have the kids say it as loud as they possibly can. This time of the day, I don't know if we have the energy, but we're going to try, okay? We are going to read. I'm going to tell you what this says, and then we're going to say it all together. Can you guys help me be really loud? All right, but being loud, we still have to be understood. We have to be able to understand what you're saying, so we need to say it really slowly, okay? You guys with me? We can do this? All right, the first one says, spare the rod and spoil the child. Okay, can you be really loud? Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Spare the rod and spoil the child.
Very good, you guys were amazing. Let's do another one of my favorites. Children are to be seen, not heard. Okay? So, you guys are going to love this next part. You guys are going to love this next part. All right, give me just a few more minutes. You guys ready? 1, 2, 3.
Children are to be seen, not heard.
Very good. Sometimes we have trouble with the not there. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? Whoa, discipline and punishment. Welcome to the age of corporal punishment. That means I get to discipline you as I see fit. So everybody put your hands out like this. Oh, some people know where we're going here. This
Slap my
means
wrist.
if you are misbehaving, I can come around and I can smack your knuckles till they bleed if I want to. Because you are misbehaving. If you've been really bad, I have permission to beat you. In fact, it's expected that I beat you if you are misbehaving. Okay? I can have you write standards. I can have you come in from recess and stay in after school and at lunch to write 100 times with chalk on my chalkboard. I will raise my hand and not speak out of turn. Or I will not dip my friend's hair in her pigtails in the ink. Or I will not hit my neighbor. Now,
Should
what
I do that
is
in my
this?
classroom?
It is. It is called a dunce cap. Now, what is the purpose of a dunce cap? Anybody know? Yes, I heard it back there.
Humiliation.
You would sit on my stool. You don't get the privilege to just sit up in front of the class and wear a nice hat. Oh no, you get to sit on a stool, put my dunce cap on your head, and the rest of the class has a very important job. And that is to humiliate you until you cry, so that you won't do that again. And in fact, I'm sure I won't have that trouble with you guys. But I have a letter that a parent sent to me about a student named Billy, who was in my class previously. Anybody named Billy in here? Oh. All right, listen to this. It says, Dear Miss Desmond, little Billy limped home from your class today because he said you beat him with a paddle. There were welts on his rump from where you struck him. I would like to know what he had done to deserve such a whooping. The poor child could barely sit down for supper. And I nearly forgot to mention the bruised knuckles he had as well. Please tell us what terrible behavior caused such offense, so that we may punish him further. My work is done here. If you get in trouble at school, you get in trouble at home too. And you might even get in trouble on the way home, because we all know it takes a village to raise a child. And therefore, everybody in town knows you. And if you got in trouble at school, everybody knows. So you could get in trouble all the way home. Now, earlier before we started, I forgot to ask you, because I just assumed this is such a good group, you guys had already done your chores. I know it is winter and it gets dark earlier, so I know you have chores at home. So I'm going to let you go in just a few minutes, but I have 2 more questions for you. First off, how many people have a nice place to go home to tonight? Nice warm place to go. So don't be afraid, it's okay. Okay, I do not. As the teacher, I get to do a wonderful thing called boarding around. And that means I get to stay with the families of each of our children in the school. So the parents get to know the teacher and keep an eye on her. And the teacher gets to know the parents. And therefore, the parents then trust and respect the teacher to instill moral behavior, right? To discipline as she sees fit. Now, how many of you guys have a nice place to put me if I come to your house? Yeah. Okay, because some people didn't, and they put me in the barn. And if I get sick, is there anyone else to run the school? No. How many of you think it'd be a really great time? No school.
Yeah.
Oh, you get to be minors then. Because if you want to have, be a rich merchant and count out money, you have to know your numbers and your letters. So going to school is really, really important. Education is so important that during the colonial era, people thought if you were misbehaving, you had the devil in you, and we had to beat it out of you. Because my job is to teach you. Your job is to let me do my job. And education helps us all, you're already smart, but education helps us learn our letters and our numbers so we can be rich merchants. Okay? All right, so with that, I want to say thank you for the privilege, boys and girls. And what do you tell me?
Thank
you, Miss Desmond.
And class dismissed.
So here's some of the rocks that they make different arrowheads out of. In the desert area nearby where we live, they use these types of rocks. And here are some examples of arrowheads that were used by Native Americans as well as other people who would make them to hunt for things and to protect themselves. Here's some arrows with arrowheads on the top, on the tip of them. And then here is a fur. Here at Calico, actually they did a lot of silver mining, so it wasn't so much a gold rush place, but they do cover that a lot in their history. But they could mine for things like this. This is called kernite. Then this one is called ulexite. This one is colemanite. And this one on the bottom is actually silver ore that can be processed to be more like silver. Pretty cool, huh? And then in the mines, of course, they'd be in the mountains, so they would need a lot of ladders. These were their ladders, just made out of wood that they would make themselves. You can imagine that that might not be the safest ladder ever, but if they made it themselves, they could trust themselves with it. Here's some mining tools. You guys might recognize this from Fortnite, if you're watching this and Fortnite is still a thing. It's a pickaxe. And then here's some other little things that miners might carry. And there's some silver ore as well. Here's what a mining cart would look like inside of the mines. Pretty heavy. Here's what the miners would have looked like. A lot of them were having mustaches and beards and things. Pretty interesting.